Let's check the antiderivative we just did. We started out with this as our integrand, the formula for the top of a unit semicircle, and we got this as our antiderivative. So let's take the derivative by hand now. 1/2 is a constant multiplier, so that stays there. What's the antiderivative of arc sine? Not everyone has memorized that, but we just did something related to that previously. Here we took the antiderivative of 1/1 minus x squared, and we got arc sine. So the derivative of arc sine must be 1/1 minus root x. 1/root 1 minus x squared. So that turned out pretty not as bad as it could have been, right? And then what are we going to do with this other part? Let's do the product rule because we have to. So we'll do 1/2 x prime times root 1 minus x squared plus 1/2 x times this thing derivative. We'll get the same thing here. X prime is just 1 times root 1 minus x squared, and then 1/2 times x, and then what's the derivative of this? Well, this is like 1 minus x squared to the half, so we get 1/2 times 1 minus x squared to the negative half times the derivative of the inside. So we get the same thing there plus the same thing there. Not much we can do to simplify that. Plus 1/2 times x times 1/2. We could rewrite this as 1/root 1 minus x squared, and then this is just negative 2x. So now let's simplify a little bit. We have 2 here and 1/2 there, so we can cancel those. And then it'd be nice if we could boil all this down to just that, right? And this has a fraction, this part doesn't have a fraction, but this has the same fraction that that does. So I don't even need to think about common denominators, they already have a common denominator. So let's reverse the order that we're adding things here. So we'll put this 1/2 root 1 minus x squared there. And then bring this over, we'll have 1/2 1/root 1 minus x squared plus this part, which is 1/2 x times a negative is a negative x squared over 1 minus x squared. So we'll have the same thing there, and we have a factor of 1/2 in common, we have the denominator in common, so we'll do that. And then we have a 1 minus x squared there. And now the simplification maybe isn't obvious. Let's kind of draw it off to the side. If you had something like 1/root 49 times 49, just to use some simple numbers, you'd say that's 49/7, which is 7, right? If you're dividing something by its own square root, then the answer is that square root. So we'll have 1/2 root 1 minus x squared plus 1/2, and then the square root will be on the top, root 1 minus x squared, and we won't have a denominator anymore. And so we'll get, that's the same thing twice, so overall we get 1 minus x squared, which is what we wanted. We could also graph this and check it on Desmos or anything else. So we'd have our semicircle there, and let's graph, so that's little f, and then we'll graph big F, just a sec. All right, so here's our original function, our semicircle. Here's the derivative we got before we did all that right triangle stuff. And here's the new derivative we just got by doing all that right triangle stuff. And then we took the derivative by hand, and it's looking good.